Hi, Sandra.
Hello, Noel. How are you? I can't but
Fine.
help. I'm going to say a few words about you first, but I can't help but hear the parrots and the ducks in the background.
Exactly.
So I just wanted to be able to welcome everyone today, all of our guests, wish everyone a happy new year. And I know we're all looking forward to a great 2021. For those of you not in Ontario, I just want to mention that we are in lockdown in Ontario and under stay-at-home orders. So it gave me great hope when a few days ago I was speaking to Noel and his wife Elaine, who's there with him, and he was telling me that they had been in a restaurant for dinner where there were about 100 people. And I can only think how great it must be to be in Australia right now and not here in North America. So I want to tell you just a little bit about Noel. He grew up in the city, and you can correct me, Noel, seeing as you're right there. He grew up in the city and moved to the rainforest over 30 years ago. And at that point, he was primarily a painter and a sculptor. And it was later than that when he became influenced and became a glass blower. I think that was back in 1988, if I'm correct.
That's
Um,
fair.
is that it?
Yep.
So Noel's work is very diverse. Many of you are familiar with it, very familiar, and some of you are not. There's a beautiful piece behind me right now, which is a glass piece by Noel. And his narrative is drawn from natural history and from primitivism. You will find there's a bird motif in many, in most of his work, actually. He particularly is intrigued with parrots and birds of paradise. Some of these are on the verge of extinction, if not already. So I know you do quite a study and you've been studying them for at least 30 years. Noel is truly inspired by his environment and interaction with wildlife. And he obviously is in the right place. I've seen some of the films that we're going to be seeing today, and it's overwhelmed with wildlife. So at the present time, Noel lives, I mentioned that he moved to the rainforest, but he lives in Koala on the Pacific coast in Australia, and he's going to tell you what necessitated his move there. After Noel speaks, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel, and he's going to see that you can ask questions of Noel. Probably the best thing to do is to use the chat box or the Q&A. If you want to write some questions in, Daniel will ask those questions for you. And something else I'll mention, it's 5 o'clock here, at least in Toronto, and maybe in many parts of the country. And some of you have a cocktail or a glass of wine. It's now 9 o'clock Sunday morning in Australia. And I hope that Noel and Helene have had at least one cup of coffee by now. I'm sure they have. So it's my
Good
pleasure.
question. Yeah.
Yes, go
No, we
ahead.
haven't.
Oh, you
Working
haven't
up
had
to
coffee
it.
yet? You should have.
No.
Oh, really?
No.
What?
Yeah. No,
Really?
thanks for reminding us. Yeah, no, we should have.
You should have, exactly. I would need coffee. I can't get
Yeah.
started without coffee in the morning.
Yeah, no, normally we would have. I think we've been psyching ourselves up for this conversation and completely forgot about the coffee.
Well,
So thanks
it's
for the
lovely.
introduction, Sandra.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's great
Yes,
to see both of you.
we're not in lockdown. Not here anyway. There are parts of Australia where the pandemic is a bit more influential, but around here, we would have to go probably 600 or 700 kilometres to come across the lockdown.
We do have social distancing though, and we still have to scan into whichever venue we do go to for social, for distance tracing.
Yeah.
So
no, it is quite different.
Yeah, we don't have that. I can only speak for Canada or Ontario, but we don't have that type of scanning at all. I wonder how that would go over here, whether we would be obedient enough to do that.
Well,
It must
you
have
have to be able, so you have to go out
Right.
to do the scanning. If you stay at home, it's it's not going to happen. So I think it has changed. I mean, the way that people live has changed around here, even though we're not overly influenced by the virus at this time.
Right.
And there are COVID guards at each of the venues where we had the dinner, where that was a really large venue and the tables are all distanced so that there's no one actually really near each other, just family groups.
Mm-hmm.
But it had a good thing for it's been good for the environment, curiously, for biodiversity. The impact that we humans have has diminished somewhat. The aeroplanes aren't flying. It's very hard to get a flight into Australia at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
The logging has diminished. The construction industry has kind of slowed down. There's a whole bunch of things that have slowed down that have given the environment and ecology a little bit of breathing space. Not much, but a little bit of temporary breathing space. And people are spending more time out in the bush, out in the country, walking around their gardens, going out into the countryside, going up into the mountains, spending more time on the beach, and getting to witness biological diversity that they may not have had when people were traveling overseas and going to work more.
Mm-hmm.
So there has been a slight personal shift for people, which is a good thing.
So no, tell us, I mentioned that when you moved to the rainforest, you started painting and you were a sculptor at the time. Can you tell us what the things are that influenced you, that drew you to become an artist?
I was encouraged as a child by not so much my parents, but by relatives that would give me art materials and ask me to do drawings, as most kids do.
Right.
And then I had an uncle that was giving me European art magazines. So that was pretty unusual. And I really engaged with the abstraction. So I was pretty young when I was looking at pictures of European abstractionists. And I really loved it. I couldn't help myself but start painting abstracts, which was kind of a bit going further back into childhood, when you start drawing and you're basically scribbling, and then finally forms start to come out of these things. And I was quite happy to go back into it with being an early teen, looking at these European magazines and appreciating the cultural substance of this stuff. But I was also interested in the wildlife around where we lived. We were in a regional city, so nearby there were forests and beaches, and my family had come from a farm, and where that farm was had previously been native endemic bush forests, but the land had been cleared by our family, so they'd eliminated a whole lot of biological diversity, and I think that kind of interested me. And that grew as I got older. So when Helene and I and our young son decided that we wanted to move to somewhere more culturally appropriate, somewhere more beautiful, we chose to move to northern New South Wales. And it turns out that where we were moving to was rainforest country. Some of it was quite damaged and regenerating, but there was a culture around here of people that were also fighting for the forests, fighting for the survival of the rainforests. And it was an alternative movement. And I guess in our late 20s, we found ourselves part of that particular culture. So we gravitated towards that landscape and that place where others of a similar mentality move to. Would that be right, Helene?
Oh, absolutely. I think we lived in a temperate climate down south, and here's subtropical. So we never expected the learning curve to be as vast, fascinating, edgy as these last 30 odd years have been. Incredible difference in landscape and wildlife.
Yeah, it's far more intense around here. The tropics, as you would probably understand, have a greater diversity of life forms than a desert, for example. And Australia is, as you'd all know, is a big island, and around the edges of it, particularly around the south and eastern and southwestern edges, big forests, really big forests. In the middle is desert. In the north, you have other types of landforms where Indigenous Australians are still very prominent, and that interested us as well. So we've travelled around this country a bit, and we've seen all sorts of different landforms. But it's such a big country. We've only really touched the tip of it, and but the inspiration behind my work was initially landscape, but once you start looking closer at the landscape, you start to find that other entities exist in those landscapes. And then when you start to think along the lines of environmental protection and the decline of species, as an artist, one starts to consider how is one going to work around these things, and that happened to be the area that I took an interest in, was environmentalism as an art form.
Mm-hmm. And when did you take the turn to glass? What influenced you?
Well, when we moved up here, up into the forest, I just thought I was going to paint and grow vegetables, and of course that fantasy diminished pretty quickly. Life was going to be a lot more complicated, and Helene, fortunately,
I thought I was going to pursue writing. I ended up.
So Helene ended up as managing a glass blowing studio.
Oh, she's a wonderful writer, though. I've read some of her letters, and they're beautiful. You're a very good writer.
Thank you, Sandra.
Yeah, well, within maybe 6 months of living up here, Helene had been embraced by a glass blowing community up here, and who wanted her to manage them. So Helene managed a glass blowing studio.
That was before we lost a car that got washed away down a creek. We were in a flood.
You lost a car? Oh.
We lost a car. We nearly lost Noel. We had to climb out through the window. He lost all his camera gear. It was just a tiny causeway with.
It's a very high rainfall area around here. We were getting between 8 and 12 feet, or 2 meters and 4 meters of rain a year.
We were really quite naive as to how volatile the climate is here.
So Helene got this job in a glass blowing studio, and I picked up a job curating a university art gallery that wasn't too far away. So I was putting on exhibitions, and I got to understand a bit about the glass blowing studio, and I put on an exhibition of the work that was coming out of that studio. And the guy that owned the studio asked me if I'd be interested in helping him evolve his work. It was primarily a production studio, but he had ideas about producing more singular objects. So, and it was less drive for me. I didn't have to stay away a couple of days at a time. I could live at home still and live in the forest, and I only had to drive 30 minutes to the glass blowing studio. So that was the that was my immersion in hot glass, pretty much. And I was assisting with the design, and I was doing all the photography around the studio, and
still painting.
And still painting.
And having exhibitions.
I mean, I was exhibiting my paintings in galleries around this area. And it took me a while actually to think about how I was going to engage with this glass material. And I wasn't particularly attracted to the techniques that were being used in that studio. But on one occasion, a few years into that, I attended a lecture being given on ancient glass by a guy from a museum down in Victoria, but he was up this way giving this lecture. And he was speaking about core-formed glass, some of the earliest forms of hollow-formed glass, where molten glass would be wrapped around dung and mud that was on the end of a stick. And once the glass cooled down, you could wash out the interior, you'd have a little hollow vessel. And these were typically created around the Middle East. I know Egyptian pharaohs used them for perfume bottles, and I was fascinated. A light globe went off for me. It was a primitive form of glass blowing, and my attraction to primitivism, to older forms of doing things, and cave art, that attraction in glass. Here was an ancient form of working with that material. So I took that idea soon after into the glass blowing studio, and we looked at, rather than wrapping molten glass around mud, although we did try that, but wrapping molten glass around a bubble of glass and blowing it and making parts and around that bubble and blowing that. And then it became like doing paintings, loading up and having a number of assistants making parts and loading them onto that bubble of glass. And that's the core logic behind this work that I do now, and I've been doing for quite a while now.
Yeah, I found that really fascinating because I've known you for 16 years now, and I know quite a bit about your work, but somehow I never put together the layering, the way that you create the pieces and the color and the dimension. So it is a technique that you can call your own. It isn't a technique that anyone else is really using.
Yeah, look, I'd withhold from that. I don't know what other people in glass are doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the main thing for me was the motif, the logic behind the way the things looked. And so the technique pretty quickly, once I had that figured out, evolved into using the glass as a symbol for biological diversity and a symbol for our connection to it. And parrots, of course, were a perfect subject matter. Australia has lots and lots of parrots. There are lots of parrots around South America and Central America and Asia and Africa. And there are over 350 species of parrots. So there's a lot of different color sequences. So as a painter, looking at the way those colors are formed and the sequence of them in those symbolic species, and the fact that so many of them are affected by a decline of the environment, gave me a continual logic behind my work that also occurred in the paintings, but then I was able to shift it into the glass. So yeah, it's the technique is very painterly that I use, mm-hmm. and I have a good team of people that work with me. It's very labour intensive. We have on occasions 6 of us mm-hmm. working on a piece, which might sound ridiculous for something that might only be this big, but there are lots and lots of parts, and some of the parts will take 2 or even 3 people to make one part that's going to go on that bubble. So it's complex. It's very time consuming, but it's also, I think, worthwhile to go to that trouble to produce these pieces.
So Noel, I know you have some slides that you're going to show us, and maybe now would be a good time. It will give people an understanding of where you are as well. You know, I was going to suggest to take a little walk around your garden, but maybe we could look at the slides.
Yeah,
I think Daniel will put those up. Oh, okay. So I didn't mention this, but of course, I did mention that Noel and Helene have recently moved to the coast. They did live in the rainforest, as they've mentioned. And in 2019, November, we all know about the horrific fires that took place, and they lived through those fires. I'm going to let them tell you about it.
Yeah,
so, maybe you'll tell us a little bit about that, please.
That image was taken at 3 o'clock on a Saturday morning from our place in the forest, looking across to a mountain opposite us that was alight. We'd been warned this was happening.
We couldn't see anything 40 minutes beforehand. It wasn't there. That came that fast, and we didn't think that. We knew that there was a fire over the other side of the mountain, but we were watching periodically during the night to see if it was going to be coming our way. And the sound that the forest was making was really peculiar. There was a really hot wind. The trees were groaning, but we could see no fire, no flames. And then we got a phone call from the neighbour across the road.
Yeah, someone that was a little bit more elevated had seen the fire. So Helene stepped outside and saw that.
I nearly passed out.
And you were at the bottom. You were just at the bottom of that, weren't you?
We're just at level with that. It was facing us.
Okay.
So there's a gully that goes down to the bottom, and then there's a creek or a river, and we knew that it was coming down the hill, and if it came up the hill, it would go fast. So we had to get out right then.
And then embers from that first fire, that first image, flew a couple of kilometres to the other side of our property. And this is the escarpment behind us, behind our place. This is much closer. This is only a couple of 100 metres away, and it's coming down the escarpment. The embers flew right over, and this was coming close. The fire brigades, the rural fire brigades, were amazing. They were all over it. You know, there were fire tenders from a lot of the local villages that were closer to the coast. The local fire brigade, the Wilsons Creek Fire Brigade, were right onto it. So pretty much the road was taken over by fire engines and firefighters. The aftermath, of course, was devastating. This is a tree that's still alive.
We didn't lose the house, and no properties in the valley were lost. It was absolutely incredible. The wind changed.
Yeah, this is a massive tree that is burnt out but still alive, and it's got this very interesting triangular kind of footing into the ground. There was a lot of devastation. A lot of animals and birds lost their life, and of course that was early on in what happened in Australia that went for a number of months, where anywhere between, estimates would suggest anywhere between 3 and 5 billion animals died. Billion. That's a view of the fires around our place from the air. So we were living up in that forest in the middle of all of that, and now our place had been for sale. We had decided prior to that we were going to be moving away. Our son and his girlfriend had a new child, and we were going to be involved in looking after her. And we were living at this point when we were up there. It's about an hour away, so we thought we would sell the place up there and move a bit closer to participate in looking after Maya. and I could still carry on my artistic practice. It wasn't going to make too much difference anymore. I'd learned a whole lot of living in that environment. You know, it changed our lives dramatically, but I had a whole lot more work I wanted to do. Helene had other things that she wanted to do. And so we actually moved to a spot on the coast. That's a view from where we were. That's up in Huonbrook. And that's the hill opposite us. That's the rainfall, the high rainfall. That's an escarpment would have anywhere up to a dozen waterfalls coming off it all at once. That was the driveway down to our home. It was, you know, we drove into some pretty intense country there. Beautiful place. Great biodiversity. You know, there's a koala just near the house. They're you know, obviously a fascinating animal. They were so badly damaged in the fires. A goanna, this is a really large lizard. He's about 2 meters long, and they sleep like that in the trees and just hang out there like that, just relax, cruise on. There were a lot of wallabies around. So this is a species called a redneck paddymellon. So that's the female and her joey. They're such a beautiful, gentle animal. We were very fortunate to live where there's a lot of different amphibious species. This is a red-eyed tree frog, and that you get anywhere up to a couple of hundred of those making a chorus. So they would do that by expanding that flesh around their neck and make these beautiful chirping calls. Hundreds of them all at once. It was an amazing thing to witness.
Wow.
Snakes. Helene, how
Comfortable, Helene.
How about that one?
That snake.
I was look, seriously, you know, we would see a snake a day, really, and it was interesting working out and understanding, trying to figure out, you know, how to live with them, because it was their habitat as well. This particular one stayed around for several months, lived near us there, and they just are sort of oblivious to anything we do. We can walk over them, we can walk around them, but that one was so big, it was humbling. It was humbling, and I just sat there and couldn't believe, really, just
such a beautiful animal.
Yeah, it was extraordinary.
Yeah. So, yeah, we learned to live with snakes. In Australia, you learn to live with all of this stuff. A very rare gecko, leaf-tailed gecko, beautiful camouflage skins on it. They're just a very secretive animal that live a beautiful, peaceful life. They're not interested in us. But of course, I was interested in them, and so, you know, I'd always grab them and go, Helene, check this out. And I think on one occasion I had one like this on my hand, and I think I went to grab him and he bit me. So
actually, someone just wrote in and wanted to know if the snake was poisonous. Those snakes.
No,
No?
pythons are a constricting snake, and so they can bite, but they're not interested in biting you or me. They're more interested in just laying still and waiting for some unsuspecting critter to come by that they can constrict quickly. They can move.
Yeah, look, that picture of the wallabies that you saw earlier, they were prime food for that python.
Yeah.
But there were some very venomous species around. I think called a rough scale snake, highly dangerous and venomous, and they would chase you. So you know, I've been chased by rough scales, but I know to get out of their way. There's red-bellied black snakes. They were just so beautiful, but also quite toxic.
How fast do you have to run to get out of their way?
Oh, not that fast, you know. If you're not close to one, it's like, you know, scooch a couple of meters away. There are some that are very fast. Our son got chased by an eastern brown snake once, and you know, he came up to it face to face. He was on his hands and knees crawling through the bush and came face to face with an eastern brown and he had to leap backwards and it came after him.
Wow.
They're a very dangerous snake. But look,
He was on his hands and knees because he was planting trees.
yeah. Yeah. And then we moved to the coast. Anyway, we sold our place in the forest, and we were pretty traumatized by the bushfires to begin with, and then the pandemic struck, and somehow the sale of the property did go through up there.
It's still beautiful. It's in recovery now, and it is beautiful up there.
Yeah, the Australian bush evolved with fire, so many species of trees benefit from fire, and the seeds will go off. So we moved to the coast, and that's the Pacific right there. You know, early in the morning, you know, people go out surfing. You know, it's also, you know, beautiful landscape, some different species of trees, different species of birds.
Lots of parrots. You can probably hear them still here in the background.
So how far are you from this beach, from your home where you live now?
Well, that hill that you see in the middle of that hump, our house is just on the other side of that hill. So it's a
2-minute drive.
2-minute drive, a 20-minute walk down to that beach. Yeah. And when we stand on that beach, if we look out directly east, the next land that you would come across is in Chile. So the desert landscape, desert coast in Chile.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing to the south would be Antarctica.
That's something. So you're there by yourself. Well, look how beautiful that is. Is that volcanic?
Yeah. Look, it's a very volcanic area. There's a massive extinct volcano nearby, and the landscape around here is profoundly influenced by that volcano. There's been evidence of it found 400 kilometres out to sea. So when it went off, it was something else. As it is now, it's about 50 kilometres across the rim. So this thing was huge. It was called a shield volcano. So when it blew, it wasn't sort of that kind of volcano. It was more that sort of shape. And when it blew, everything went flying everywhere. Many millions of years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's a very, very interesting geological place to live.
So what season is it in Australia now?
This is summer. And
it's been very humid as well.
Yeah, because we're in a tropical kind of area. It's the humidity can be really ridiculous. It's not a time to go to a glass blowing studio. We simply don't.
This is your time off, your holiday season.
Time off, yeah. I can paint and we do other stuff. And you know, the glass blowing, when we're in this environment, we have to do it in the cool of autumn and winter, and occasionally into spring when it starts to warm up again.
This is an unusual formation. The clouds, is that just the photograph, or?
Yeah, that was the reason for the shot. It was so weird. It was I looked up in the books to see what sort of cloud formation this was. And it was kind of like a whole bunch of other cloud formations accumulated into one.
Like we've had, you know, the seasons are becoming different. So we're seeing different patterns all the time. And yeah, that was extraordinary. Yeah.
So the biological diversity around here includes some massive trees. So this is just the top of a tree that the koala would live in. This is a koala feed tree called a blackbutt. The trunk of this thing was massive, and there's a number of these very big koala feed trees just in proximity to the house here where we live. And the community here is encouraging the regeneration of the bush around here, improving the the quality of the bush by removing some weed species and planting more of these koala feed trees. And it's a big kind of, I guess, environmental movement around here in this particular community anyway, luckily.
So you have a story about the koalas.
Yeah, I think I'll just repeat this one I gave to you the other day. I was driving up the road one evening and there was a koala on the road in front of me. So I had the headlights on. I could see this koala walking up the road, and the roads are not fast roads. You drive pretty slowly on these country roads. And so I was driving pretty slowly, and the koala was walking up the road towards me. I stopped the car. The koala kept coming. I could see him in the headlights. Then he disappeared. And I yanked on the brake, jumped out of the car, and he had his hands on the bumper bar of the car. So I thought I'd better do something to protect this koala. So I wondered, I should talk to an expert. There were a number of experts around. So I picked him up very carefully, put him in the car and drove home. And in the car, he sat on the passenger side seat beside me, put his hands up on the dashboard. So it was like he was watching where we were driving. When I got home, I phoned up a koala expert who told me to go back to where I'd found him and see if I could find a big eucalypt tree of a particular species that koala would go into. And our son, Gabriel, he said, look, can I come with you? I said, sure, you can come with me. So we drove back 10 minutes back to where this animal came from. And Gabe really wanted to get the koala out of the car. Can I get that out of the car? Can I? I said, sure. You've got to grab it behind his arms, effectively, because they've got really big claws. So Gabe grabbed him and picked him up. The koala swung around and got the claws straight in Gabe's neck. Gabe screamed, and I was trying to yank the claws out of Gabe's neck and control this koala at the same time. So I got the koala loose, and I spotted this tree, which is why we stopped the car. And I leaned over the fence. There happened to be a fence there to put the koala at the base of this big tree. It was an electric fence. So the electric fence just belted me in the chest. The koala went flying through the air. Gabriel was behind me screaming at the claws that had just been yanked out of his neck. And the koala bolted up the tree. That's my little koala story.
So no good deed.
Everyone
No.
survived.
Yeah. It was good.
This is interesting.
Yeah, this is a remarkable tree. We have these plenty of endangered birds and species around here. So the osprey eagles, these are living up a man-made pole because all of the big trees that these birds would have inhabited and formed their nests in along the coastal waterways near the sea, all of those big trees have been removed. So they've been replaced by these man-made poles, and the ospreys are recovering. They were down to not many birds, but they took it upon themselves to produce these nests. So the bird on the left is the chick, and he's just starting to spread his wings, and that's both the parents waiting with him. So they would still be feeding that bird. They would go off and grab fish. Oyster catchers, another endangered species. They just lay their egg in the middle of the sand. Curlews. These are a nocturnal bird. They have those very big eyes so they can see what they're doing at night. In daytime, they just stand there like that. Pelicans down on the beach. A beautiful, colourful bird. These are a swamp hen. More pelican. Yeah. Surfing at the beach. I know. We do have a number of, but we've got a lot of parrot species around here too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not a lot. There are 8 that I've counted, parrot species around here. This one is an eastern rosella. This is reputedly the parrot species that has the most number of colours in it. The opening photograph in this presentation was of a piece I did around the eastern rosella. In fact, this glass piece behind us is the same one. So the colours that occur in that bird have been usurped and put in this piece. King parrots, another one that, another
Beautiful.
quite a sociable bird. This is a male. The male has this big red frontal body, and the female's green on the head. They look quite different. They're quite dimorphic. I do get commissioned to do paintings on occasion. So I was commissioned recently to do a painting around king parrots. And this was king parrots that the lady that commissioned the painting lives in a beautiful area, but there are houses everywhere. So I painted the area pre-colonisation. Painted some of the species of trees and bled them into the abstraction of the foreground, and included those king parrots in the painting.
Oh, glass blowing. So this is your team or part of your team?
Yeah. So Nick was taking the photographs, and John and Greg and I were making this piece along with Nick. So this is down in the Canberra glass work. So sometimes we do have to go a bit further afield. So as it is where we live now, the glass blowing studio I work out of, which belongs to one of the guys that works with me, John, is about 4 hours away. So I load up all of my equipment and drive up there. When we work in Canberra, it takes me more like about 15 hours to drive there. The other guys fly down, but I have to drive. I lug all the equipment and the colours. And
he's been working with the same team for about 20 years now.
Yeah. So I drive down to Canberra. The other guys fly, luxury glass blowers, and we meet up and have a few sessions down there. So this is an example of how the work is assembled. John and Greg would have made that part. I'm locating it on the piece in relation to the documentation I would have had with me around what species of parrot that we were working with. So basically the pieces are all two-sided. So the piece that you see on the underside, the piece of glass there, would be replicated in that piece that I'm attaching to the bubble in that image. Same with that. That's all of the parts are gradually forming on the bubble, and then the piece gets rolled out, blown out, and that's back in the other studio. And Chiara, I think I mentioned this to you, Sandra. Chiara is an Italian glass blower who was assisting us for a few years. That's Chiara in the background. She's now opened just recently her own studio in Murano.
Oh, yes. I heard about her. Isn't she the first one to open a studio in Murano?
I believe so, yep.
Yes.
Yeah. And so she got her grounding working with us. So we are just so stoked for her. She was such a hard worker, and it is very, very hard work what we're doing. And she was relentlessly putting it on us to give her more difficult things to do all the time. So it was a very quick learning curve for her. Playing with fire. So all of those pieces of mine, well, not all of them, but a lot of them are flattened, and between two bits of cork, and we try and do it not just bit by bit, but compress the whole thing. So we do make a lot of smoke. So that's down in Canberra. I'm not sure that they appreciated the amount of smoke we make, but they seem to tolerate us. That was the full team working on a fairly large piece, and so I took the photograph while the other guys were just putting the finishing touches to the shape and keeping it hot.
There it is.
And if I look, if I look flushed in that photograph, it's because I was. It gets very, very hot, and you know, we've got lots of fans and things going as well, trying to keep us cool. But you know, that was probably late in the season, so it probably was a bit warm. The glory holes in this humid environment do eat a lot of the oxygen, so we're having to share the oxygen with the furnaces, so it can get a little bit dangerous. And you know, there have been hospitalizations from this, from our team.
So when does from the heat, but when does
from
it
the
get
heat and the lack of oxygen?
It's about 3 hours in front of the furnace, so that's a long time.
Yeah. So this piece would have taken 3 hours, and the sharing the oxygen, you know, in a humid environment, the air is full of water, you know, so we're breathing a lot of water and a lot less oxygen, and we're having to share it with the furnaces, so it can get a little bit hair raising and you know, quite uncomfortable and dangerous.
I love these particular slides. Beautiful.
Yeah, look, Helene put this together to kind of illustrate the idea between the species of parrot and the glass. So, you know, some of these are quite a literal interpretation. You know, the budgerigar, the male budgerigar, has those little black spots around his neck and has a little blue patch on either side of his cheek and a little blue patch above the beak.
Right. Beautiful. Those are my colors. I love those colors. In this piece.
Yeah, crimson
Very
rosella.
descriptive.
Yeah, the rosellas are a great family of birds. So that's an eastern rosella again, with another eastern rosella piece. That's a New Zealand parrot called a kia, magnificent, highly intelligent bird. And it's figured that, you know, parrots are highly intelligent. As we know, they can learn things, they can learn language, and they can also develop a conscious use of language of their own. But these ones are extremely playful, and it's said that animals that play a lot, and that includes birds, but animals that play a lot are more intelligent. So, and these birds are hilarious. You know, the way they carry on with one another and wrestle, and yeah, it's a carnivorous parrot. That's a little lorikeet that occurs out in the Pacific, a very, very rare bird. They were on the verge of extinction, so they did okay now.
These pieces are so articulate of the birds themselves.
I hope so. You know, it's interesting taking something that's quite figurative and abstracting it, but somehow retaining the characteristics of the subject matter in an abstraction.
Beautiful.
It's an Australian black cockatoo, a red-tailed black cockatoo, female black cockatoo. Mulga parrot out in the desert. They occur out in, you know, around the central parts of Australia. So the little tree motifs in that piece were to symbolise the desert oaks that occur out there. The scarlet macaw from, you know, we saw those down in Central America. Sun conures.
So someone's saying you did a great job with these slides, Helene. You did an incredible job with the slides. Now they know you did them beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Sandra. Well, it's not hard.
So should we maybe take a walk around? Some people have asked about the paintings, and maybe just take a little walk around your home. And if we can look at your garden or kind of your environment, that would be terrific.
Well, I'm going to carry the iPad around, so please forgive me for the jerkiness of it. I'll do my best while Noel can tell you what's
You
happening.
can show us some of the pieces and the paintings. No?
Sure. So I do abstract paintings, and they can vary. Well, I don't just do abstract paintings; I also do figurative ones. But I like to do these large geometric works.
I love that piece.
And the piece over this side is this painting is also around the primitive thing that I'm interested in. It's painted on an old coffee bag or part of a coffee bag. And I started doing coffee bags a number of years ago when I found this beautiful coarse material. Some of them come from Central and South America. So when we go out bird watching, we sometimes come across these beautiful coffee bags. They've got printing on them.
So I'm going to interrupt. I'm just going to interrupt because someone has said that they can't see the images. I see it clearly, but maybe it's not being transmitted. Anyone else having a problem?
So
Okay.
this is a piece around the Eastern Rosella.
Beautiful piece. Yes, I love that bird. Beautiful.
A piece around the idea of that Marquesa lorikeet that occurs out in the Pacific.
This one.
Another Central American parrot.
Beautiful.
So we moved into this house that's got lots of walls in it. We didn't have so many walls up in the other place. And I'm very interested in trees, as you may have gathered. So this one is around tree rings, which is a science of its own called dendrography, where the climate can be studied through the space that occurs in tree rings. So anyway, it's a painting of tree rings, and you know, different years the trees will grow quicker and slower depending on the weather, and you know, it's quite a study, quite a science to tree rings. So yeah, this is one of a series of works I've done around tree rings, and now we go up the stairs. Another couple of glass pieces.
Beautiful pieces. It's lovely with the sunlight or the light coming through those pieces.
Yeah, I can see the window is a bit burnt out in the image on this device, but it's a forest out through that window.
Gorgeous colors.
Another of these organic pieces. In those colours that you...
What's the influence of the shape of that
when we
series?
were working, yeah, I'll tell you, we were working down in Canberra, and on a day off, the team and I went to the Australian Museum, and there was a virtual reality program on in the museum that was by David Attenborough. And he had this graphic aspect to the virtual reality that was speculating on early life forms. And in the bottom of the ocean, they had these forms that were kind of moving around that were kind of like a lump that had appendages out to the side of them. And I thought, okay, guys, I just had this other idea about life forms. And so I introduced this shape into our program. And we've made quite a few of these, and yeah, it's a different way of working. We have to work inside the bubble to get the bumps and humps out of them. but basically the details of the glass are still the same. I just have to locate things a bit differently.
Mhm. I didn't really mention, but all these pieces that Noel is showing us are available because he just set them up in his home so you could all have a look at them.
Yeah, our
And I guess
studio.
paintings as well. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Another piece based around a little parrot that occurs in the Pacific around Fiji, and the painting is around the idea, and I've done quite a few like this, around the idea of tracking of endangered species. So, for example, albatrosses and a lot of seabirds do have tracking devices attached to them by scientists who then follow them around in their migration. And curiously, by doing so, the birds end up making these drawings. Another couple of recent glass pieces.
I do like the ones with the black incorporated.
The black cockatoo piece.
Yes, I do.
The red spotted rackatail parrot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm sorry, I haven't got any black cockatoo pieces available, Sandra, to show you. I guess we'll be back into the studio when the weather cools down, and we'll be able to do so. We'll be back, in April, May, I believe, making new work when the weather becomes more attractive.
Bearable.
Yeah, as it stands at the moment. But, you want to be able to go into the studio and feel good about it. I think Pilchuck kind of happens in the States, doesn't it? In winter, it can snowing outside. Oh, if it just snowed here, wouldn't that be fantastic? Yeah. When we've been down in Canberra, there have been times we've been down there when it has been, quite freezing, and that's pretty good. But at the moment down there, it's even hotter than it is up here. So Australian summers are not a great time to be making glass. In terms of outside,
why don't I have Daniel put those images up on the screen so you can see them? Dan,
sure.
You have those? If you want to talk about any of them, you can.
Well, this is the Eastern Rosella piece. So you've seen the photograph of the actual bird. It does occur around here. We get them arguing on the roof of the house. They're fabulous bird, and they are great personalities. Rosellas are, there's about half a dozen species of Rosellas, and some of them hybridize. So I do get the opportunity to work with birds that by hybridizing, they sort of produce other life forms. So some of the colouring becomes really quite unique just by virtue of them hybridizing. This was of a red-rump parrot that was down at the Canberra Glassworks. So just near the accommodation where we stay down in Canberra, the little parrots that occur in the trees just around the studio there, a little species called a red-rump parrot. And so I was hanging around taking photographs one day of them on our way into the studio, and we made that piece around that, the little red-rump parrot, and a bit of the landscape around there as well.
So someone is asking, Noel, how many days a week do you work in the studio with your team? When you're in a working mode?
When we're working, we use a lot of glass, so we can empty a furnace out pretty quickly. So if we have, say, a 100 kilogram pot of glass, we'll empty that in 2 days, and then you have to melt again. So if it's a 150 kilo pot, we can get 3 days. We can work for 3 days. So we we only produce as much as we can when the pot is full, obviously. And then, you know, we have to take a day or two off to remelt and start again. But look, I don't make a whole lot of work. I mean, it's not so much about quantity with me. It's more about, well, there's an element of environmental sustainability. I'm not going to waste my time producing like, you know, 100 pieces in a year if there aren't that many economic reasons around it. The number of people that are interested in my work is fantastic, and we do get by with making maybe 20 pieces in a year. So that's there have been occasions we've made more, but in more recent times, you know, the pieces are almost as rare as the species they represent.
It's interesting to know. Yeah, I'm surprised to hear that you only make approximately 20 pieces a year.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's been in the last couple of years. I mean, a couple of years before that, we were probably making, you know, 30 or 40 pieces a year. But in a day, some days we can only do 2 pieces. Now, if you're doing a piece that takes 3 hours, 6 hours of that is enough. You know, so, you know, we'll get two pieces made. Some days we can make 3 pieces, but that's a pretty long day.
Sure.
The preparation beforehand can take months, though.
Yes, that's true.
And there's cold working. Noel hasn't mentioned that. It's not just in the hot glass studio. There's a lot of post glass working with it cold too, isn't there, Noel?
Mm.
Thanks for mentioning that. That's true, Helene.
Yeah.
Beautiful piece. So much dimension and life to all of these pieces. No,
Well, the
they're
beauty
also
of that format, that flattened format, is that the one face gets to interact with the face behind it. And then each of the faces has 5 layers of colour and clear glass. So there's a clear on the inside, colour, clear, colour, then clear again. And then that's interacting with the other side. So you end up with effectively 10 layers of glass interacting.
But it reads like a canvas. It reads as a flat painting in many ways. You know, you're looking at a canvas. You do get the depth. Very beautiful. There was another question that someone asked. They noticed that all these pieces have a shiny surface, and they have seen your work with a matte finish.
Yeah.
Are you doing those matte pieces longer, or?
Yeah, look, you know, for a long time I was doing the acid etched finish on them.
Yes.
And I was able to do that due to the materials that we were working with being chemically compatible with one another, highly chemically compatible. I didn't actually know when I started doing this work that it was that unusual that I could do what I was doing. And it wasn't until later on another glassblower, a very well-known glassblower, said to me that, you know, and he'd seen us working down in Canberra, and he said to me, you do understand, Noel, what you're doing shouldn't be possible. I didn't know that. You know, I just thought it was all okay. But soon after, we would lose pieces. You know, always you'd make, you know, you might make. This is actually another reason why I used to make a lot more pieces than I do now. We would lose a lot of pieces. We would make 5 pieces and 3 of them would crack. We might make 10 pieces and lose 6 of them. And the chemical compatibility of the colours had to be really, really on. But at a point about 5 years ago, we were losing everything. Everything was cracking. And we couldn't comprehend why. I had discussions with the manufacturers of the colours. They didn't see that there was any reason why anything was different from their end. Certainly we had our glass analysed. There was nothing different there. So ultimately, I had to, if I wanted to keep doing this work, I had to have a strategy around continuance. So the next thing I could think of was to case the entire thing in clear glass. That was, you know, we'd do the same assemblages we'd always done, but then finally submerge the whole piece in the molten glass and case clear glass over the whole thing. And that took out, theoretically, took out a lot of the tensions that were going to be in the glass. And lo and behold, the pieces survived. So we could work for a day and everything we made survived. So it said to me that to keep going with this project meant that we're going to have to case everything. The chemical compatibility of those colours had changed. They weren't as narrowly defined as they used to be. And when you put a big lump of one colour against a big lump of another colour, there are going to be tensions formed. And I'd figured out a way of working around that. And you know, that sustained us for a long time, but we were still losing pieces. And but when you lose everything, week after week after week,
That's sad. Oh my goodness.
it's sad. It was debilitating. You know, there were, you know, a team of 5 or 6 of us that were you know, just shattered, absolutely shattered by this. And you know, we're all pulling our hair out. What could we possibly do? So it wasn't until, you know, I thought, look, we'll try casing the whole thing and see what happens.
And now it's opened up new dimensions, hasn't it?
Well, it has. So it actually had to change the way I work. So previously with the etched glass, I could use a lot more opacity. The colours I would use in balance were both transparent and opaque, almost on equal proportions. Now I'm tending to use more transparency because we're going to see straight through the piece. And so the possibilities of the two sides interacting is actually substantially greater now than previous with the etched work.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. That's the piece that we saw, I think, in your living room, right? Yes.
Correct. Yep. Yeah.
Like that very much.
Yeah. That's another big piece like that. And you can see like the transparency there. Like there's, as I said, there's like 10 layers of glass.
Mm-hmm.
You know, clear on the outside, colour, clear, and then there's the space between them, the two sides, and it goes clear, colour, clear again to the other side.
I like the bubbles in that as well at the base.
Yeah, we deliberately put bubbles in some of the pieces.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
This was a response to seeing Lino work once about 25 years ago up at Chihuli's and watching him having a very defined use of bubbles. And I said to myself, well, I'm going to go random bubbles. We're going to do go the opposite direction to the maestro. Yeah, we use random bubbles.
Effective.
Yeah, that was a suite of paintings for a hotel nearby.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
This was, you know, I work a bit around, and this almost sort of predicted those bushfires up at our place. I work a bit around the Anthropocene, that period that we are all living in, and Australia being this sort of fire-prone country. And, you know, that was the basis of that painting, which curiously ended up coming to fruition with those horrible bushfires. This is a really large painting. Its subject matter is biodiversity. So there are, you can't actually see it entirely in here, but I started off by painting big bats. There are big black bats in the painting. And then there are these ghost nets, you know, that you'll see on either side of the painting. We're hearing about fishing industry just dumping their nets in the ocean, and these big nets just floating around in the ocean, which themselves end up looking a bit like jellyfish, but they just kill everything. There are snakes in the painting. There's a lot of calligraphy. There are cursive drawings, like the ones that the albatrosses make. And then there's the geometry as well. This was another, that's that painting.
I like
this one was a big painting. This one was another one around a fire symbol. This one's in the Four Seasons in Hong Kong. It's at the reception desk of the presidential suites up in the top of the building.
There's so much movement in the paintings, including the one before this one. Just so much, and then the one before that, Dan. If you go back, just the swirling. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, thanks for going back. Thanks.
Well, this one was also. I mean, you'll see that kind of almost cloudy kind of atmosphere behind it. And this one is around the idea of how life landed on this rock that we're all on. We're floating through space, and life forms have descended upon it. These particles have fallen out of space. Comets go by and drop water, and it's a miracle that this rock we're on has life on it. It's absolutely profound, and it's a worthy subject matter, I think, for painting.
Is that the piece that was behind? That's the piece that was behind you when you were speaking earlier.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. This one is around the idea. Once again, it's on those coffee bags. But I'm curious about species that could occur or should occur around the place. And our son, on one occasion, a number of years ago, was driving home. I think he only had his license for a short time, but up in the forest, he had to stop the car while a group of unidentified species walked across the road in front of his car.
Like a dog, kind of like a dog.
Kind of like a dog of some sort, but they were very stiff-limbed. Now, there's an extinct species in Australia called a thylacine. They've been extinct supposedly extinct since about the 1930s. We went through, when he got home, some mammal books, and the nearest thing we could find in the mammal book was an illustration of a thylacine, which was said to be extinct. He did a bit of a drawing for me. We sort of sketched out what he'd seen, and I've used that drawing here in this painting. So cryptozoology, I'm interested in things like yowies and species that may occur around, but the evidence is a bit sketchy around them. And of course, I'm interested in cave art, so there's a distinctly cave art sort of quality to the way I've worked that one.
And there we go.
Yeah. So the osprey is an osprey painting on the left, in that dunal system where they occur down on the coast. A few years ago, we were up in Panama. We were up in an aeroplane, and the pilot had pointed out to us what they called the red tide that was in the ocean nearby, which was something that was having a big impact on the environment there. So that painting on the right, the red one, is called Red Tide. They're painted on jute. Yep.
Someone's just asking how you treat do you treat the coffee bags before you paint on them? What do you do?
Yeah. Well, because they're super absorbent, so
Swing
you just
around here.
If you just paint on them, the paint will just disappear. It just gets.
So what do you treat it with? What is it?
I use a polymer emulsion. So it's the stuff that's in acrylic paint. If you use acrylic paint, you'll find that if you just get the raw material before the pigments are put in it, is a polymer. And that polymer I can mix down with water and spray it and seal off the jute. And you just keep sort of doing it little bit by little bit, let it dry a little bit more, let it dry a bit more. And these ones are actually fixed on the, oh, that's on a stretcher. Some of them on board. So I would have stapled this edge together and then removed the staples later. So I've used that polymer here. But the beauty of chopping up these bags is these beautiful random bits you can get. You know, I love the contrasting types of jute, from very coarse jutes through to much smoother ones. And of course, they come from many different countries, but originally the jute was grown in India. There's a big industry in India of producing these coffee bags, shipping the coffee bags all around the world, Ethiopia, Colombia, Brazil, wherever coffee's grown, Papua New Guinea. And then they ship it off to our countries where all us coffee drinkers are. Typically they've got stamps on them of where they've come from. So there'll be addresses, there'll be images of just corporate images from around that area. And I did find some with birds on them. So I was using the ones with hummingbirds on them from Costa Rica. And some of them I'm just quite happy to paint completely over. Mm-hmm. So that one's been completely painted over. Yeah.
So no, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right. Go on, Sandra.
No, I was going to say we have some questions, and maybe I'll let people have been sending in questions. I'm going to turn it over to Daniel, and he can read out the questions or let people ask them.
And I'll put this this camera down.
And by the way, before we do that, I want to say thank you. That was fascinating. I've always enjoyed your work, and I love sitting here being an observer and enjoying it myself. Thank you very much. And this is really my first, I had some wall work of yours early on. Do you remember? I took some beautiful wall work to Art Toronto a number of years ago, which we sold, and we sold it. But they weren't paintings. I do enjoy your paintings. Thank you.
Yeah, well, this geometric painting behind me related to those collage glass pieces that you have.
Yes, I love them, and we were successful with them. Our clients love them as well. Okay, yeah, Dan, you have some questions,
Perfect.
I think.
Thank you very much, Noel. So if you would like to ask Noel a question, you can either use the Q&A feature or the chat box at the bottom of the screen. So Noel, our first question comes from Glenda, and Glenda is from Perth.
Hi, Glenda.
But now living in Toronto. And she says, your work is breathtaking, and I love the bright colored glassworks in paintings inspired by cockatoos and parrots. I was particularly drawn to your paintings of marsupials, numbats, and crayfish. Are you inspired by Indigenous artists? And if so, who is your favorite?
Well, yes, I am. I find Indigenous art breathtaking. Particular artists. Look, some of the artists I admire are ones whose names I can't even pronounce. I could show you a book that I found, but has some brilliant artists in it. So this one called Old Masters. That's back to front, isn't it? Australia's greatest bark artists. So it's artists who work in bark are typically the ones that I've most admired. But look, we've been up into Central Australia and Northern Australia looking at cave art, and of course these are art forms that have been painted thousands of years ago, thousands and thousands of years ago. So the artists who did them were anonymous to us now, but at the time, these would have been quite important people in their communities who would be painting. Some of it's quite abstract, but the more figurative ones, figurative paintings, were thought to be around the idea of increase, the idea of being able to communicate with species that you relied upon, if for nothing else, food. So, and that particular notion carries through, European folk art, cave art as well. But you also often find those handprints that are left with people around cave art, and that recent painting of a pig that was found in Sulawesi in Indonesia also had handprints around it. But that painting has been dated, I think, at 43,000 years. And it's a beautiful painting. So there's a bit of media around that in this last week. But there's a British artist named Anthony Gormley, who's a really good person to look at, who has did a television program around the origins of art. And in it, he looked a lot at this hand connection to the art. And he found a guy in France that's theorized around it and actually how to do it, chewing up the ochres and spitting them out very carefully, and just making sure you've made a good impression and doing it again. But the idea, the notion around it is considered to be the capacity of the artist to communicate with the bigger picture, with being able to actually touch the land and leave your impression actually through your body, through your entire self, to connect with the landscape. It's a beautiful idea. And, I really admire that analysis of that idea. Does that answer your question, Glenda?
Our next question comes from Eva. Eva bought a work of yours in a mosaic form series in 2005. In the gallerist she bought it from said that that series was influenced by Persian rugs. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, look, when I was initially exploring the way to work with glass, and this carried on sort of on and off over time, I was looking at Persian rugs. I was definitely looking at Persian rugs. We actually were collecting Persian rugs. We still do. We've still got some beauties around the place. And once again, the geometries that are formed in those, and even the colorways, really caught our eye, and still do. So I was making some pieces, blown pieces, and some collage pieces around the geometry of the Persian rugs, but translating that into glass in effect. And I learned a lot by doing that. I learned a lot about the relationships between particular colours, and then as then the work with the endangered species evolved, the means of actually connecting these colours and the logic behind them started to become more prominent. Does that answer your question, Eva?
I think so. Our next question comes from Howard. Howard would like to know if you ever considered using other glass techniques such as fusing.
Not fusing. I did do a course in casting a couple of years ago with a brilliant local artist, Erica Meyer, who does some really intricate, complex castings. And we met for, it was a couple of months, I think, of going through the techniques and processes to create castings. And whilst I haven't done any, apart from the ones that we did through that course, it does still retain an interest for me. And I walk around with ideas in my head all the time. If it's not just working with glass, it's the ideas of what I'm painting. So that's just me. I walk around with this stuff the whole time. So fusing, no, I haven't. I haven't thought. Actually, I was offered a lot of just recently. Klaus Moyer's, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago. The family has quite a bit of his glass that available. So I was offered that, but then I had to think about it a bit. And look, I'm not really equipped to do that.
Yeah.
As much as I admire Klaus's work, you know, it was incredible.
And Howard's actually saying he was going to ask about Klaus Moyer.
Yeah.
He was quite a guy.
Look, I've never met him, to be honest.
Oh, I did years ago. Yes. Yeah.
Well, he was responsible, I believe, for establishing a lot of the education around glass in Australia.
Yes, he was.
And so he's been profoundly influential to a number of people. I've never met him.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen a little bit of his work here, but most of the work that I've seen of his has been in the US, particularly when I visit SOFA. You know, we often get to just look at these profoundly powerful works.
I'm just going to address a comment by Robin. Robin says she would love to see an example of your Persian series. If you have any images, if you email those to me, I'm happy to share them with everyone on the call.
I'm afraid that the documentation that we had around that work, we lost. We lost everything that we had on computers that were, apart from some that we were able to retrieve, but we lost, our computer crashed. I do all the photography myself, and I'd photographed everything. I document everything I do, and the hard drive in this computer that had a lot of the early images in it just crashed and burnt, and the technicians we took the thing to couldn't get anything back out of it again. And then a couple of years ago, a similar thing happened. We lost all of our emails. You know, we had thousands of emails. A lot of it just disappeared, and including all the imagery that was on it. Luckily, a lot of the photographic stuff I had begun putting on a separate hard drive, so I do have some of the older stuff. But I'm sorry that Persian work has gone into the ethers.
Robin, you're going to have to speak to Eva, I guess. Our good friend Laura Donifer is just trying to get a sense of the geography, and she just wants to know where, when you were in the rainforest, what was the major city around you, and what's the closest city you are that's to you now?
Well, we were about well, it depends what some people think a city is one thing, and some people think a village is something else. So,
right. So what's
around here, remember, the population of Australia is not great. So the biggest city, a capital city of a state near here would be Brisbane. And that's about a 2.5 hour drive from here. But there is another large metropolis between Brisbane and here called the Gold Coast. So if Laura's looking at a map and she was to look at the east coast of Australia, we are effectively located about as far east as you can get. We're at probably maybe half a kilometre back from that far eastern point. So when I said to you, the next thing south of us is Antarctica, I would have to get in a boat and go out about 500 metres, and then the next thing south would be Antarctica. But when I said about Chile being the next thing to the east, that was absolutely correct. If Laura was to look at Google Earth, which will give a more graphic image of Australia, and if she was to search for Mount Warning, or the indigenous name is Wollumbin, W-O-L-L That'll give you an idea of the landscape and the volcano. Mount Warning was that volcano. So as James Cook was sailing by in 1770, the most powerful thing that he would have seen from his ship would have been Mount Warning as it sticks up the caldera of this volcano. Does that help, Laura? Remember, you're coming to visit too, so we'll take you up there.
Yeah, I'm sure it won't be that long until Laura's back in Australia.
And you're coming surfing, aren't you, Daniel?
I mean, after I saw that snake picture, I'm gonna get a refund on my ticket.
We can calm you down with that.
Glenda would like to know, have you ever done any work inspired by magpies?
Yes, paintings. A number of years ago, I did the design for a theatre, for a play called, and Glenda might have heard of this guy, William Buckley. So the play was called William Buckley and the Wathaurong Tribe. And William Buckley was the first European person to spend any length of time with Indigenous Australians. And he was a convict that arrived on an early ship that came into Australia, into these waters. In about 1802, he and a number of other convicts escaped from a boat that was sailing towards Tasmania. He was in Victoria, and they escaped. So they thought they were going to walk back to Sydney town, back up the coast. But he was on the inside of a bay, and he kept walking, he and the other escapees. They actually walked, they circumnavigated the inside of the bay and ended up pretty much back at where they started, but on the other side of the bay. They saw the ship they'd escaped from. The other prisoners decided they would go back. They gave up. They were starving. They were tired. They'd been walking for weeks. Buckley decided he was going to keep going. Soon after, he discovered the grave of an Indigenous man whose family had just buried him. So this is how the story goes. His name was Murrungurk. And it was basically a pile of sand near the beach, and they'd shoved the spear into the sand near where Murrungurk's body was. Buckley found that spear, and he kept stumbling along, and soon after came across the family. Now, in the Indigenous mythology around those people, when you die, you came back as a white ghost, and that you wouldn't be able to speak the language. You would have to be re-educated back into your tribe. So the arrival of Buckley, this was like, the story was true. And now Murrungurk's totem was the magpie. Beautiful birds. There are two noted species, the white-backed magpie and a black-backed magpie. So where Murrungurk was, they were the white-backed magpie. Where we live up here, they're a black-backed magpie. And so the Buckley story, if anyone's interested in early Australia, the story of William Buckley is a really, really interesting story of a white person spending 30 odd years with Aboriginal people, forgetting how to speak English. So when the next group of explorers came through in the 1830s, and they somehow met Buckley on the beach, he couldn't speak English anymore.
It's quite a story.
Our next question comes from Bill, and this is a quick one. Bill would just like to know if the glass sculptures are open at the top.
Yes. Yeah, they're not completely closed, no. I did do some early on that were completely compressed. And then I saw Laura Di Santillana's work, and I thought, well, I think I'll just keep them open. I don't want to draw any parallels there, so we kept them open.
Thank you. And our last question comes from Vivian. She would like to know, in what year did you work on your Color and Light series. We have a matte piece that we bought many years ago from Gannon House Gallery in Sydney that is primarily black with accents of red and blue, which she loves. And she also really enjoys your current work, since it's almost like the juxtaposition of the colors.
Yep. Well, those pieces were I guess in a similar manner to that Persian work that you asked about before. These pieces were me exploring the way other painters would work with glass if they were doing glass. So those pieces were inspired by the work of Rothko, the American abstractionist. But I also did, works around Gerhard Richter and Morris Louis. There were, a number of North American abstractionists that, I basically, figured out a technique, my technique by Pollock, Jackson Pollock. Figured out my technique by exploring those abstractionists, and so that would have been, those pieces would have been done maybe. I'm taking a guess here, maybe around 2000, maybe 2000, 2001, 2002, something like that. Maybe.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Is that when they were? This has been great.
There'll be a date, probably a date engraved into the bottom of them.
Anyways, no, I want to thank you. We could probably go on for a long time, but you've been here with us for a while. Fantastic. We loved, I'm sure I'm speaking for everyone who was with me today. We love visiting you, hearing not just about your art, about your culture. We didn't take a walk outside or see what's outside, but maybe that means we have to come back another time to see you. It was
look, it'd be lovely to get up in the forest with you and
wow.
show you around.
I'll do that with you.
Yeah, with a body cam or something, or
there you go.
One of those things on my head.
Well, we'd all love to come and visit you. We'll do a studio tour for real in live time one of these days. How's that?
That's fantastic. Yeah, no, that'd be good. This Zoom seems to work pretty well, so maybe we could do it actually in the glass studio in the
Wouldn't
hot
that
shop.
be fun? We'd love to do that, but I'm worried about those temperatures. If there's not enough oxygen for you and the blowers, if I bring a group, what happens? It's not.
Well, no, we don't do that. We don't do that crazy stuff anymore. No, we do it when the weather is perfect.
Okay, perfect. Anyways, have a good year. Happy 2021. And I'm sure I'll talk to you again soon. It's been a pleasure. And Helene, I can't see you, but I'd like to say goodbye to you as well. You're somewhere. It's always a treat to see you. I always enjoy it. You know that.
Thank you. Same for us too. Thanks very much, Daniel and Sandra.
Yeah, look, and thank you, and good luck with everything, folks. Good luck with this really strange time we're in. So,
yes.
Yes.
Yeah, please look after yourselves.
We hope we're closer to the end than the beginning, okay? We'll use Australia as an example. Goodbye. Thank you so much. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Cheers.
Yeah.
Bye. Cheers.
Bye.